particularly strong over the 5 to 7 days, I should say, of the 1 week stage races. Looking back through the history though, Brian, there's some big names have won this race, but also some fascinating names when you look at the makeup of them. We talk about Valverde as being the 5-time winner and the winningest in its 97-year history, this being the 68th edition. But it's an interesting mix. Oscar Freire winning in 2007, so there's some sprinters that have won it as well. Eric Zabel was the winner in 1997. So these are names that we recognise as being big sprinters having won this race, but yet amongst them there's the likes of Chris Froome, the winner in 2015, as I say, Alejandro Valverde, Jakob Fuglsang more recently. So in a way, in the shape of Fuglsang, a sort of classic specialist 1 week stage race specialist, but also on that same list of winners you've got top bunch sprinters as well. So it's a fascinating early season race, isn't it?
Definitely is, and you go a little bit further back to the era just before mine. Luckily I got to race against him. He was one of my, or still is one of my heroes, Freddie Mertens. I think he has got the most stage wins in this race of 13, and you know, in those days, you know, kind of long stages with sprints at the end, but you know, last year it wasn't. Last year it was quite brutal. I still remember the stage that Ethan Hayter won up that kind of cobbled climb. That was absolutely brutal, and you know, I think this race is going to produce some really nice finishes, today being one of them. It's a really interesting route in this year's Ruta del Sol, but it changes all the time. It's up to the individuals, the race organisers, you know, what sort of race they want. They definitely last year had a difficult one, you know, hard for the sprinters, although Andre Greipel got his first victory, or he got a victory, and I think it was in Mallorca, and then came here and got his second victory of the year. So slim pickings for the sprinters, and I think the Classics riders up against some of the kind of GC contenders will be battling it out today for stages for the overall. But it's really exciting prospect, and you know, the field that we've got here is just top notch. When you consider that, you know, other races are going on at the moment, I think there's about this weekend about 4 separate races. It just goes to show you that the kind of strength and depth, and you know, that teams have to have these days. In my day, there was in the Motorola team there was 18 riders. Now a lot of the teams have between 30 and 32 riders now to be able to field teams, you know, across the board.
Well, we're getting a look there at Carlos Rodriguez, the incredibly exciting Spanish talent, the 21-year-old. There he is, right in the middle in those new colours of Ineos Grenadiers this year. The red shoulders, the very dark blue central part of the kit there as well. What an exciting rider, Carlos Rodriguez, on all terrains as well. Watch out for the 21-year-old this week as things tip upwards in particular. I would suspect, looking at their team, Brian, he might, even despite his very young age, be their leader this week. They have Jonathan Narvaez as well. But Eddie Dunbar also goes well over sort of 5 days in this kind of lumpy terrain. It'd be interesting to see how the Irishman is going. But it could well be Carlos Rodriguez taking the leader's role in that Ineos Grenadiers team this week.
Well, you would think so, because of the form that he had in Valencia. He looked pretty good in that race. And also Magnus Sheffield, the American rider, looked good in that race as well. So interesting to see how he'll go in this race. He's certainly a rider that's, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing. You know, it's his first year at this level, and it looks as if he started the year on really, really good form, and you know, Valencia will help that, and you know, he moved forwards. But yes, or a lot of riders in the Ineos Grenadiers team here.
Well, Brian mentioned that win of Ethan Hayter last year when the race was held in May, and it was a very impressive finale. Of course, those of you who went on to follow the Tour of Britain will have seen him performing likewise whenever the road tipped up and things got grippy. Such a super talented all-rounder, the British rider. Well, that was at Alcalá la Real, where we go tomorrow. Same finish tomorrow on those cobblestones and the snaking turns that bring us up to the Citadel there tomorrow on the cobbles. So a fascinating finale tomorrow, as we have today too. And before they even get there tomorrow, they've got 3 third cat climbs, a second cat and a first cat too. So a very jagged affair. Those of you who follow us all week will notice immediately that Spanish is not my first, second, third or fourth language, in fact. But I did a little research into the exact definition of the word sierra, because of course it means mountains, and we are surrounded in this race by sierras. But the direct translation actually means saw. And so many of these stage profiles, in fact all of them, resemble a saw when upturned, or an upturned saw if you like. So there we go. That's my linguistic education over and done with for the day. So those of you rejoining us, welcome back for our coverage of stage 1 of 5 of the Ruta del Sol, the Vuelta Andalucia, with myself, Jez Cox, and Brian Smith as well. This gap has gone back up, and if anything, it's going up a little bit more, Brian. Because I say it was down below 5 minutes at one point. It's now hovering just under 7. And the rider on the front in your shot there is Ander Ocamica of Spain. In those, I quite like them, those dark, deep purple colours of the Burgos Biache team. They are one of 10 pro teams in the race. We've got a big field actually, 141 riders started this morning. 10 pro teams, 12 World Tour teams for this Pro Series race. But maybe for those of you who are new to following the breadth and the plethora of races we have here on Eurosport GCN, I should explain. The World Tour is the very highest level, and then the Pro Tour is the second rung down, if you like. And this race being a Point Pro, or a Pro Series race, means we have in this only World Tour and Pro teams, so we don't have any continental teams in here at all, which means we've got a really high quality field, and a big one too laid on for you. And fingers crossed, as we go through the next few weeks and eat our way into the main part of the European Classics racing calendar, that we don't get too many more COVID interruptions, Brian, because already this race has lost some of its stars in the shape of Fulsang, Nibali and Valverde. So hopefully things do seem to be calming down a little bit more, certainly where we are in Northern Europe, and getting a little bit quieter on the COVID front. Fingers crossed it might stay that way.
Yeah, it's one of these things that's here to stay. You can't become complacent, and you know, we know it's still touching some of the riders and some of the teams. Unfortunately, they will not be here. It will still be a good race, of course, but you know, I'd love to have seen the likes of, you know, Fulsang and Valverde not here. But I don't think it will change the way that the race is going to be ridden today. It's going to be ridden aggressively, and I just got some information on this climb at the end. We go over a bridge. When we go over the bridge, 1.3 to go. The average is about 7%, but the last 400 to 500 metres is the steepest part, and it's over 9% for the last kind of 400 to 500 metres. So when we come over that bridge, there is a sharp right-hander, and then that's where the climb starts. So it's 1.3, average 7. So it's going to be quite brutal. And I think that's why we've got this situation. But looking at the situation we're in at the moment, look at this is a stage is just 200 kilometres long. We have had a bit of a battle for the King of the Mountains points in the Meta Volantis, which is the sprints. The rider on the green bike from Caja looks like there's one climb to go. It looks like Quadros from Caja will be potentially the King of the Mountains leader. That's important for a team like that in the Spanish race. So that jersey looks as if it's going that way. The Meta Volantis jersey, well, it's still, I think, open now. I'll just have to. There's been a couple of Meta Volantis today. I don't know if you've got that information of who's leading that competition, Jez. But looking at the way that they're riding, it's rolling at the moment. We do have that climb, a long climb where they could ship a little bit of time. We're just looking here. Looks as if we've got a wee problem over on the right hand side. Just a crash there by
into hotspot sprints, but it does sound good, doesn't it? Mita Valentes, we'll just stick with that. Winner of the first of those was the American from Knoxville, Stephen Bassett of Human Powered Health. Second there, Runa Herogods and Lindsay Van Wilde. What's happened is it's if you like the non-Spaniards who seem to be going for the hotspot sprints, and the Spaniards who are going for the King of the Mountains, because I think now, come that final third category climb, the only person that can challenge Alvaro Cuadros of Caja Rural for that pulling on the King of the Mountains jersey, that white jersey at the end of today, will be Xavier Isada for Euskaltel Euskadi in the slightly changed orangey kit this year. We've still got that orange top, black shorts. And there is Alvaro Cuadros, as we looked at them there, leading for Caja Rural. They're still on that long flat, that 55k of flat that'll take them to a little kicker that then starts the Alto La Paria, which is the final classified climb of the day. And then from then onwards, it's actually 12k net downhill all the way down to the reservoir and that final kicking climb that Brian has mentioned there. So once again, Brian Smith using his little moles in the race. When I say in the race, and it often is with Brian, literally, not on the bike, but in amongst the various staff working on the race, Brian has his very handy moles, and one of those moles has been drilled to give us that information. We will, of course, not disclose said moles identification, but very handy to have, Brian, so thank you for that. That should set us up for an exciting finale. Very similar to tomorrow, although tomorrow I think is not just a little bit longer, that final climb, it's the cobbled nature of it as well that makes it really, really tough. It was a kind of a really big step up for Ethan Hayter, that win last year. I won't bang on too much about the British rider, but it was very impressive the way he took it on, showing his I guess track-derived ability to drive long and hard seated in the saddle, particularly whilst on that cobbly finish. So we will look forward to that tomorrow. AG2R come trying to look after Ben O'Connor, don't they, this week, Brian? And this should be a really important season for the Australian, having finished fourth in the Tour de France last year, determined, I think by all accounts, to prove that was no fluke. And this is a good opportunity this week to protect him, I guess, as a team too. So the two Belgian riders on the team, which only ever has Belgian riders in it, because they're a big part of the Sport Vlaanderen initiative is about supporting young Flemish riders, getting them into the pro peloton, helping them develop, partly through racing a lot in Belgium, Holland and France, but spreading their net even wider as a pro team as well. And they've settled into that now very familiar yellow, blue and white kit. Very easily recognisable, handy for us commentators, that's for sure. And now we start to see the teams, as Brian said, who are serious about the overall. There's been a real change in Bora Hansgrohe over the course of the winter, hasn't there, Brian? Switching in a way away from focus on their sprinters and towards becoming much more of a general classification focused team. They have good options in this race too, in the shape of Matteo Fabro and Leonard Kamner, or Lenny Kamner, as he's become known on this network. But they do, don't they? There's multiple options there. Aliotti as well. Strong climbing team for the week.
Definitely a good team, and a lot of teams are kind of changing the focus and different things there. And talking about changes, just saw you talking about the Bora team there, Cesare Benedetti, who won stage of the Giro d'Italia just 2 or 3 years ago. He's now riding for his another nationality of Poland. And it's the rider just on the right hand side in the green of Bora. So yeah, they do have plenty of options. We just saw that Ben O'Connor was towards the front. Today I'm not too sure. Ben O'Connor will be there and thereabouts, but I think it's more Cosnefroid or Van Avermaet, possibly Cosnefroid in the form that he's got. Kind of quite explosive for AG2R. Like you say, they've got Lawrence Nation, Oliver Nation, Hees van Hoek, Stan de Wolf. They have got a solid team here to cover all bases. But I think that this is definitely depending how Van Avermaet's going, of course. It looks to be there and thereabouts, but Cosnefroid for me maybe this type of finish would suit him.
There's an exciting rider to watch, and a rider on the up as well. Benoit Cosnefroy of France. He rides with the number 92 on his back, the 26-year-old, really coming into the prime of his career, it would appear. There's so much pressure on any young French riders who perform well in the hills in particular. That's not to even talk about the Tour de France. But a good classics rider, very good classics rider as well, of course. We're getting a look at the back end of the field, and there's an indication that the pace is starting to go up. We should, I would have thought, start to see that time gap coming down, but it's still sitting about 6 minutes 45 for our 8 riders who've been away for pretty much all of the stage since the start of that first climb. Sorry, Brian.
Sorry, Jess. Just at the back there, we saw a new signing, and it was just announced recently, just at the back in the kind of fluorescent Intermarché kind of yellow and blue kit, and that was a VIVO at the back there. You can just see him on the right-hand side. You know, a lot of riders without contracts on the demise of the Quebec team, the World Tour team, and you know, the latest one to come from that team to the World Tour is VIVO. So VIVO's here, and I think it's a really nice signing for Intermarché, and I'm sure that he'll gain some points.
Yeah, it's lovely to see, isn't it? The 39-year-old. I mean, that shows how much faith they have in him at this stage, because he's had some nasty crashes, nasty injuries the last few years, some of which have actually affected the way he rides, literally his form on the bike. And you can see that. He's got an interesting riding style as well. You can pick him out a mile off, can't you? And well done for spotting him there, Brian, from behind. He's a tiny, compact figure. You could almost, if he was to hunch down and start sprinting, you go, oh, there's a sprinter right there. But actually, he's a wonderful climber. And he climbs with a certain style which is just, you can't really describe it. It's just VIVO. It's the way he rides. But if you notice, one of his arms sticks out at a very funny angle, and that I do believe is down to some of the recent breakages he's had on that side of his body. He's a tough guy, and to keep coming back, particularly at the age of 39, and get yet another pro contract, we take our hats off to him. I'm sure he'll be motivated, particularly this week, I reckon, Brian, to make himself seen. He is at the back of the peloton though at the moment.
Yeah, look, it's, you know, he's not, I wouldn't say he's in the twilight. He still looks like a 12-year-old. But like you say, he's been through the wars with a few crashes, but definitely a rider that can get some good points. In a year that, you know, there's a lot of teams chasing those points, because at the end of this year, it's the top 18 teams will be, you know, given a World Tour license for the next 3 years. So it's, if you want in that World Tour, you have to be in the top 18. And, you know, these points are not just the points that you gain this year, it's the points that you've gained over the last kind of couple of years. So they do it over the 3-year period. And there's a few teams at the bottom of the ladder at the moment need these points. And for Intermarché, they haven't had the best season over the last kind of couple of years, but they've already had a win so far. This year, and you know, they're looking to gain as many points as possible, and I'm sure that VIVO, and I'm only guessing that he's going to be riding the Giro d'Italia. You know, he pops up every year, potentially, you know, top 10, which will gain points for the team. And you know, he's a really interesting rider, and you know, 39 years of age. I'm pretty sure it passed his mind that could have been his last year, and I'm so pleased that he is here. And okay, he's a kind of big mountain specialist, but you know, he pops up here, there and everywhere, and I'm sure he'll be an asset to that team.
Miguel Landa being picked out there in the middle of the red of Bahrain Victorious, third in this race in 2020, behind Jakob Fuglsang, of course, who I've said isn't here due to COVID precautions. Landa is, though. And Brian, mentioning that Bahrain Victorious team and Miguel Landa, that team is properly stacked. There he is. Is he going to have an A-class Miguel Landa week or a B-class Miguel Landa week? Because he doesn't half tend to blow either one way or the other. He had a fair bit of bad luck, of course, the last few years at key moments, just when you think he's going to achieve something really big and in a way kind of fulfill his great potential that we all see he has. In that team as well, Jack Haig, second in this race in 2020, so actually one place ahead of Mikel Landa. So they've got experience here and the kind of riders that suit this jagged terrain. Damiano Caruso's also in there. Don't forget, second in last year's Giro and out this year to prove that was no fluke, but still at the age of 34. And Wout Poels as well. So that is a very well-suited team for this week, I'd have thought, Brian. They've got to be amongst the strongest of these teams.
Yeah, they come in with only 6 riders, but definitely 6 very strong riders. It will be interesting to see, how well Landa is going, but I'm not too sure. Is Landa looking at the Tour de France this year? Is Jack Haig looking at the Tour de France? That's a long, long way away, but it's one of these things that's, this is a race that's, we could see both Jack Haig and Mikel Landa do well, and if they do well, it just adds a little bit kind of confidence going into the bigger races. If you are doing well early season, it gives a little bit of confidence in the team and your teammates. When you're working hard for someone at the front, you know that they're going to deliver. And yeah, look, Landa, like you say, it blows hot and cold sometimes. I just love, this. We have an expression here in GCN Eurosport, free Landa. We just want to see him just go out there and, rip the race up, especially in the big high mountains. And he does that. But then, a few days later, it's, something happens. And, okay, he's had bad luck with crashes and things like that in the past. But, I'd rather see a good Landa here. And in any race, I'd rather see a good Landa, because I just love the way he races. And, if we get a bad Landa, then it definitely is a bad Landa. So I hope we've got a good one here.
And Mikel Landa is from this part of the world as well, in southern Spain. He is, according to our good friends at Pro Cycling Stats, down to ride the Giro and the Tour de France, according to early indications this year as well. So perhaps his team deciding that he's better spread across them rather than going all in for one. Because Jack Haig is listed as intending to start the Tour de France this year as well. So that'd be fascinating as well for the 28-year-old Australian from Southport, who's really come into his own these last 2 years and fulfilling his great potential too. So focusing back on our breakaway again, who is still holding 6.5 minutes, working well together by the looks of it too. So we're just under 47k to go. Our 8 riders still have 6.5 minutes clear. The 2 Spaniards, the 2 Belgians, the Czech rider in the shape of Vojtech Repa of the Equipo Kern Pharma, and then the rider who's on the front right now, Ander let me wind up and start that again. Ander Okamika of the Burgos Biache team, a Spanish rider in the purple there, and they're joined by a Brit and an American, Mark Christian of Eolo Cometa, and Stephen Bassett from Knoxville in the USA, riding in those new colours of human-powered health. Of course, that's the new iteration of Rally Pro Cycling, as it was last year when they were racing in kind of pure orange, very Euskaltel-Euskadi colours in a way last year. One of the weaker teams by their own output this week, I would suggest, Brian, you're welcome to disagree with me, is Alpecin Fenix. They also only have 6 riders, but not necessarily bringing absolutely their A game to this race. They've got a team of, well, how do I say this, kind of workhorses, perhaps.
I just have to remind, with your Spanish, you had to struggle with Ander Okamika, the traditional Spanish name for Burgos BH. But yeah, not every rider. You look at Total Energies, and they've been kind of devastated a little bit. They've got 4 riders here: Bonifacio, Van Gistel, Rodriguez, and Yuri Sagan. But yeah, you got to remember that sport. We're talking about. Alpecin Fenix, 2nd division team. We're saying, not too sure how many riders they've got in their team. I'm not too sure they've got as many as possibly some of the others, but they're deciding what races they want to do and not. Just looking now, 31 riders, so they have got enough riders. You got to remember that. one of their star riders, Matthew van der Poel, is back training in Spain near Calpe area at the moment, just putting in the kilometres, and they've come here with riders, 5 riders, 6 riders. Van Koersbroek is just at the bottom there, but Aldani, a good enough rider that can sprint well, and these are their opportunities. Although we're looking at the team and maybe it's not as strong as other teams, there's opportunities for them, and kind of surprised that they're not in the breakaway today. That type of team look for the opportunity, and I bet you now they're wishing, the sports director in the car is wishing they were in the breakaway today, because 6.5 minutes with 44 kilometres to go. I know we've got a long climb of just over 8 kilometres, which tops with 12 kilometres to go, so 20 kilometres to go is a hard final, and you can bring back a lot of time for a tiring group. But 8 riders, it's not 4 riders, it's 8 riders, and they're all swapping turns at the front and looking at the front of the peloton. Now we're starting to see Ineos Grenadiers, and that just goes to show you that not only is the teams of Bahrain, Bora, AG2R, Intermarché and Astana, but Ineos Grenadiers realise there's a serious threat here from the breakaway. They want to win this stage, and so they've sent the Aussie Cameron Worth up to the front to add a little bit of firepower to the chase.
Yes, the Australian part-time pro cyclist, part-time pro Ironman triathlete, fascinating rider from Sandy Bay, mate, and doing what he's paid to do at the age of 38 as well, getting on the front and firing up the big engine to close it down. That's very much his job within that team. As I say, still mixing up as he has been over the last 2 years, having made his return to pro cycling with Team Ineos in 2020, end of 2019 it wasn't. He swapped his way back in after about 5 years out, racing pro Ironman during that time, training under the same coach as Chris Froome at the time, and training with the Ineos riders, Team Sky riders as they were then, and now he finds himself back in that team with a very specific job to pull hard on the front, which is what he's doing right now.
I think we're looking at birthday boy.
Aha! Evgeny Fedorov, the Kazakh national champion, hence that jersey. And that, of course, will be an important jersey to have within that team. Name change for Astana this year to Astana Kazakhstan. And I quote, "Looking fresh, we are ready to win. We are rolling pedals for the gold medals. I continue. Our job is to win. Astana is my team. I'm riding to win, and it will be done. Astana is my team from Kazakhstan." If you've not seen it and you wonder what on earth I'm talking about, get yourself online and look up this year's Astana wrap. It is classic. Brian and I had a chat.
Do you think they're going to wrap 2 happy birthday tonight for Fedorov, for his 22-year-old blessing?
I do hope so. It's a kind of rebolstered team this year as well. That wrap was kind of indicative of where they hope things will go this year. And certainly they have had the return of Miguel López, and they'll hope that he can come up with the goods. He didn't seem happy at any very few moments at all last year, so hopefully his return back to Astana will be a good one for him. Can he come out on Sunday when we race into Chiclana de Segura up that big final 7K climb? Can he be coming away from this with the yellow jersey? In the foreground of his shot there, another fascinating and interesting rider for Intermarché Wanty-Gobert is Benjamin Gourmet, the 21-year-old Eritrean sprinter. We just saw him there, just in your shot. There he is, on the right-hand side of your screen. He's going to be a fascinating rider to watch this week, because although I call him a sprinter, he's probably better thought of as a fast finisher and a fascinating rider who's kind of seems quite happy not to classify himself as a sprinter, but a good all-rounder with a very, very fast finish. He'll be an interesting one to watch should a bigger group come towards the finish with him in it. And there he is, mixing up at the front, perhaps looking to protect the likes of Domenico Pozzovivo. I'd have thought Pozzovivo could get protection on the wheel of pretty much any of the riders in here, because he's one of those riders, I guess, Brian, you don't want to be on the wheel of, do you? And that's a big advantage. Tiny guy.
Definitely. But I was just looking there at the front there, Taco Vanderhorn for not the bike exchange, Intermarché was had just done a long turn at the front there. You can see that normally at this stage that the breakaway would be well under control, and the riders at the front would be communicating, they'd be swapping turns, but Intermarché have decided that they want to get something out of this stage today and put 2 riders towards the front, and Taco van der Horn being one of them, and we know how well he can ride. Strong Dutch rider. But just look at the formation here. Mark Christian, the British rider from Isle of Man, just does his turn, moves over. They're all working in harmony. There's no breakdown. They're all communicating with each other. They're all helping each other. They all believe that they're in with a chance today. They'll know the information of what's happening at the front of the peloton. That's not only were there 5 teams riding, and there are now 6 teams riding, and some of the teams are putting 2 riders up towards the front. I'm not saying it's going to be panic stations, but there has to be a little belief from the riders in the breakaway. If they combine to help each other, then they could go the whole way. So for me, it's not a cert that the breakaway will have their day, because these riders are not coming up and doing their normal kind of threshold stuff. They have to push on a little bit. They'll probably have to push on a little bit harder than they thought they would have to do at this stage at the start of the day. But such was the breakaway's lead, as you say. About 15 minutes earlier in the day, they've brought it back, but still a long, hard job to do to bring them back into the fold before we get to this final climb up to the finish.
Yeah, it was 15 minutes, the lead, after only about 50k as well. But a big reason for that was that big first cat climb. It was nearly 15 kilometres in length when you look at where it actually starts from. The Puerto de El Boyar, which was the first cat climb, the first categorised climb of the whole 5 days, in actual fact. We're just getting some sad news, particularly on day 1, that Guy Niv, the Israeli rider on Israel Premier Tech, there was an Israel Premier Tech rider down in that crash we saw up against the barriers. I think he was the first of those on the right-hand side, and he has had to abandon the race. So we do wish him the very best in a speedy recovery at this stage. Very early season, of course.
The other rider was Nathan Brown, Human Powered Health. He was, I think, one of the other riders that hit the deck there. So unfortunately, Israel Premier Tech have lost Guy Niv. Still waiting for an update on Nathan Brown, of course.
I'm going to be non-cynical here, Brian, and say, hey, it's a surprise. None of the World Tour teams made it into the breakaway. Is that a surprise? If say any of the riders from, say, Team Bike Exchange or a Quick Step Alpha Vinyl rider maybe have made it in here, would they have been allowed so much leash? It just seems fairly textbook, that, or am I being cynical, Brian?
I think maybe not in this race, but maybe some of the other races. They'll be in the team meeting. They'll make sure that certain teams don't infiltrate the breakaway. On the first stage, it's always one of these situations, especially in an early season race. You never know. But I think it's just a case of what they want to get out, what the World Tour teams want to get out the race. They want to win the race, of course. They want to maybe try and win the stages. They want other teams to maybe kind of help them by controlling the peloton. That never really happened earlier on, as you say. After 50 kilometres, 15 minutes, that says to me that there was a lot of poker. Nobody wanted to ride. The first stage, 200 kilometres, with these climbs early on, nobody wanted to ride. Nobody wanted to make that big effort on that, big long climb of 14.6 kilometres at the start. And because of that, the breakaway put the effort in there, came down off the descent, and voila, had 15 minutes. And after that, it's been quite rolling, and it's forced the hand of the teams. Just when they think they'll sit back and let other teams do it, and that's what happens in bike racing. It's poker and wheels. So a breakaway of 8 riders, that's a strong breakaway. Normally, you say in the team meeting, just let 4 or 5 riders go. It will be some maybe the second division teams. But never underestimate them. Some of these second division teams, some of the riders within it are strong riders, and we're seeing that today. Like you said, this is a level of a race that there's no continental team. Some of the continental teams, okay, some of their riders are maybe not, strong enough to go all the way, but second division teams, 8 of them, working well together, are going to prove to the peloton that they're going to, have to do something to bring them back, and that's why some of the teams are starting to put not just one rider but 2 riders towards the front. Taco van der Hoorn here, strong rider. He's not just riding tempo in the front, they're having to chase hard. So this is setting up nicely, still in the balance, and it's going to be a really hard, exciting finish to today's stage. So be prepared.
So we're looking at the front end of our peloton, increasingly turning red and blue as the mass team of Bahrain victorious as they became last year. There were a few sniffs and laughs, certainly amongst people I was speaking to about that name change. It seemed to work for them, though, Brian, last year, didn't it? Because they had a very good year, Bahrain victorious, having, of course, been Bahrain McLaren the year before. Shake-up of management, shake-up of riders, a new name, and it kind of seemed to work for them last year. And some of the riders it worked for best last year are in this race, in the shape of Jack Haig and Damiano Caruso. Of course, that second place at the Giro, a real high watermark in his long career at the age of 34 now, having long been working for the good of others, getting his opportunity on that occasion to finish on the podium in a Grand Tour. This is the year where he'll look to try and prove that was no fluke. So we are past the middle section of the long, flat 55k that lead to the final 2 climbs. And we've gone past the Fuente de la Piedra Lagoon. We had a little look at that from on high. I'm pleased to see we're getting all our live shots. The last race that Brian and I did together on the mic, of course, was the Saudi Tour. We had a few problems with aircraft. So people hearing us back on the mic together will be pleased to be watching racing in front of your very eyes. And there is so much of it set to be happening. It's an incredibly busy week on the home of cycling, Eurosport GCN. Let me talk you through some of it while we watch the midsection of this long, flat sector. The Volta à Algarve starts today as well. That also runs alongside this race all the way through to Sunday. And our colleagues Dan Lloyd and Adam Blythe will be talking you through that one. There's also the Tour des Alpes Maritimes du Var, and that is running from Friday to Sunday, 3-day stage race, of course, the 18th to the 20th, and that'll be with Jose Bean and Matt Stevens. And then finally, on Sunday, of course, begins the UAE Tour. And that'll be Carlton Kirby and Magnus Backstead talking you all the way through that long one. Of course, those of you who are watching this coverage will be able to see all of the above. And the UAE Tour from Sunday will be available to all of you, sadly, except those of you in New Zealand. But all of the others are free from restrictions, and you'll be able to enjoy them, of course, on the GCN app. And they're all available live and on demand on our digital platforms. Don't forget, of course, on the GCN app, you can get stat lists, race profiles, results, and they can all be found by just clicking on the race poster on the app itself. So do check it out. Of course, not long after that, Brian, the UAE Tour overlaps with opening weekend, which is the weekend after next. That's traditionally seen by many traditionalists, I guess, as being the start of the European road racing season. And you will, of course, be able to catch on this very network the Omloop Newsblad for both men and women on the Saturday, so not this weekend, the weekend after, and then Kuurne Brussels Kuurne, of course, on the Sunday, and then it all kicks off. But it's a pretty busy week this week. And there we get an indication of just how flat and fast things have become. It's going to be a very, very different finale as we head our way into this the final climb, having crossed over the lagoon. The shots of the lagoon should be fascinating. As they enter into Cordoba, which is the final province of the day, and it's where we spend much of tomorrow, they take in that third category climb of the Alto de la Parrilla, and then across the bridge over the Isnaja Reservoir, and then that tough snaking final run in. steep as well, a steepening all the way to the line as well in Isnacha. We actually cross the same bridge and take in the same part of the climb in tomorrow's stage, halfway through tomorrow's stage, in fact, as we make our way from Archidona in Malaga all the way up to Alcalá la Real. A much more snaking route tomorrow, but it takes in the roads we're on now, and it takes in the same bridge and the same climb that we're finishing on today. So a nice little fillet for the people of Isnacha to be able to enjoy the Ruta del Sol this week on 2 occasions. That is
I was just getting some information on Nathan Brown for his supporters over the ponds. Just abrasions, but it looks like he's got a broken finger. So unfortunately, I don't think Nathan Brown will be able to continue. So starting with 5 riders, Human Powered Health are down to 4 riders in the first stage, which is not too good in its way. And I believe that Nathan Brown was looking forward to this race, and he had a good winter behind him. So unfortunately, just a crash like that, abrasions, potentially a broken finger, unable to continue, unfortunately.
That is a great shame. I thought so with him and his fans, no doubt, as well, back in the States. So that leaves Ben King, a very experienced Ben King, of course, good all-rounder. Chad Haga, Giro TT stage winner, of course. Those two, both in their early 30s. And Stephen Bassett, who is, of course, in the breakaway. And Gavin Mannion as well. They had a great year last year as Rally Pro Cycling. Very evident on the European scene, not just in terms of the colour of their kit, but also just the way they raced as well. So we wish them well this week. We often see, whenever a team is reduced down to 4 or even 3 sometimes, those who remain have a little bit more freedom and panache in the way they race. So I hope we see that in those orange jerseys for the American team, all American riders.
I really do think they'll continue to grow. Like you said, not only were they shooting in one front just last year, they were shooting in both fronts. They were riding, they had success in Portugal, success in, Tour of Britain. And, normally when you get a second division, it's hard to get the results not only in kind of one programme, but to have a double programme and get results in both. That shows strength and depth. And I believe that... they kind of bolstered their, sports directors. Alex Sanz Vega has gone from Team Quebeca after 7 years onto the team. So, he's looking after a lot of the Spanish races. I believe that Henrik Redant also has gone here. So they've got some real talented sports directors that will help develop the riders.
Yeah, that stage win they got in Devon in the Tour of Britain last year. Carpenter taking the win there on that occasion. One of the best race finish celebrations from a solo rider I've ever seen. It was absolutely wonderful to see on his face just how much it meant to him and the team as well on that occasion in Devon, in front of a big crowd in Exeter too. I was lucky enough to be there on the line with a mic in hand to capture it all. So the gap is not coming down anywhere near as quickly as all this work would suggest it should, Brian. That's assuming the gaps we're being given and fed to us and our live graphics here are accurate. 6.5 minutes with 31k to go. This is looking better for the breakaway all the time, and I've promised myself now for well over a year that I'll try not to talk all breakaways out of existence, because they do survive, and these guys have worked very, very well together. Talking of Stephen Bassett, he is on the front right now in those orange and purple tips to the sleeves there of the Human Powered Health team. He clicks his elbow, gives way to Mark Christian, the rider from the Isle of Man, who's had, he's chopped and changed teams a fair bit. Some of his teams, of course, have disbanded in the shape of Aqua Blue Sport. He was part of that team that was sort of disbanded in 2018, just before the Tour of Britain it was. In actual fact, they were due to be coming to that, and then the team pretty much abruptly ended. And he went back to Team Wiggins Le Col, having been in Team Wiggins prior to the Aqua Blue Sport experience. And then he went through Tim Elverson's Canyon DHB team for a year before then moving on to the team of Eolo Cometa, the team, of course, which is owned by Ivan Basso and Alberto Contador. And since then, actually, he's been very evident. Not a surprise at all to me to see him in the breakaway, using every opportunity And you'll know this experience, Brian. I guess any pro cyclist will have experienced this at some point in their career, where you suddenly realise at some certain point that your career could be over through nothing to do with you, through teams disbanding and stuff ending. And I guess those experiences for a rider in the middle of his pro career, Mark Christian is 31 now, it can't help but make you make the most of everything when you've been through that experience, I guess.
Yeah, it's always difficult. You see riders getting opportunities and other riders not. I think one of the riders I would love to have seen, maybe kind of stepping up is Jacob Scott, who recently got the King of the Mountains award in the Tour of Antalya just last week. And, when you look at what he's done in the Tour of Britain, I think commentating on the Tour of Britain last year, and it's not for the first time he's won the King of the Mountains. He's won both King of the Mountains and sprint shares at the Tour of Britain, and he comes up with some good performances. And not only does he perform well in the roads, but I believe that he's the endurance British champion at mountain biking. But he's one of these riders I scratch my head. Why is nobody seeing what I can see? Give that lad an opportunity. And every year that goes by, you have to think to yourself, he gets a bit older, and teams are looking for some of the younger riders. So that there are riders out there that I don't know why, for some reason, they don't get that kind of opportunity. I'd like to say also probably Rory Sutherland, not Rory Sutherland, Townsend.
Yeah.
Yes, given that opportunity as well, because the way he was getting the results, his sprints and things like that. So the Irish rider Rory Townsend was definitely another rider that could possibly have got an opportunity. But I don't know what some of the teams are looking for, but. We do produce, Britain and Ireland, even in the States as well. The races that we've covered there, you see some great talent, and why are the teams not giving these guys an opportunity? But I suppose they can't give everybody an opportunity, and there's only so many spaces in certain teams. But there is a lot of kind of talented bike riders out there, and not everybody does get that opportunity of moving up to, Pro Continental or Pro Team and World Tour Team. It's always very hard. It's getting a little bit more cutthroat now, cycling, to get into these teams.
Yeah, I'll just add my tuppence to that, Brian. I could not agree more with you, particularly in the shape of Jacob Scott and Rory Townsend. Those two performing absolutely out of their skin, particularly in the Tour of Britain. You'd have thought any of the World Tour teams seeing the performance of Jacob Scott last year would say, look, this is not a one-off. This is utter consistency, and what a value he could be to any team. There we go. I don't want to get told off for talking too much about the British riders, but there's two who aren't in the race, but could well slot into any one of these teams very handily, I'd have thought. Not that we want to take them off the hands of Tim Elverson, because he's got a couple of gems right there. Anyway, focusing back on this, we can see new teams come into the front now. We're seeing ever more the white top, blue shorts with Aular on the sleeves. That is, of course, where Brian and I were talking to you from just a couple of weeks ago in the Saudi Tour, Aular being the central hub of that race. They are a key sponsor now of that team. And that is, of course, the team of Team Bike Exchange Jayco. We haven't mentioned him yet, but their leader, we suspect this week, will be Simon Yates, the British rider. He's only ever ridden this race in 2019, and he won a stage as well as the King of the Mountains jersey. I'm looking to try and pick him out in our shots, but he's the very upright riding style, usually, of Simon Yates. Easy now, of course, to pick the two Yates brothers out apart because they ride for different teams. Adam now, of course, riding for Ineos Grenadiers. That does help, Brian, doesn't it? It's a very handy one.
You mean Thankfully. You couldn't tell them apart?
No, of course I could, yes. See,
yes. I'm a twin and people can tell us apart.
Oh, that's very tricky.
I've got a twin sister.
Ah, well, that helps. So we're only just over 5 minutes. So the hard work being done is paying off. We've chipped off over a minute and a half, which will give some spirit to the front end of our peloton. They still only have 27.5k to go, though, to bring them back. And the looming hills are on the horizon because we are about to spill our way off this long, flat section. In about 3 or 4k's time, they'll go through Villanueva de los Aguedos And once they're through there, they start a long climb, which really, from the base of it, is about 10 kilometres straight up. The final 8K are classified, only an average grade of just under 4%, and that's the Alto de la Parilla, and that's the final climb before the jagged descent down to that bridge across the reservoir. There we go. They heard me asking for him. Simon Yates, the British rider, winner, of course, of the Vuelta in 2018. Simon Philip Yates, I should say. And, well, there would be an easy pick, a good pick for the general classification this week, I'd have thought, Brian.
You would think so, and I'm sure he's not here just to get round. So I'm sure that, you know, Bike Exchange will want him to perform at a high level. So it does look as if he's been looked after. But just remember that this climb tops with just over 12 kilometres to go to the finish, and then it's quite quick downhill, and then we've got that climb up to the finish, which I think they'll need maybe about 30 seconds, but a majority of this time gap, they'll have to make sure that they bring these riders back well inside a minute before we get to the top of this climb.
Yes, well, it will be interesting to see what that climb does to it, because it's going to start in, as I say, about 3K's time. Very gradual and actually fairly direct as well, up to the top of the Alto de la Parilla. But
the riders they've got to use are going to be slightly different because it will be going uphill. So that a lot of the teams will be using their kind of rouleurs, their kind of strong riders on these kind of undulations. But as soon as it starts to go uphill, I know it's, you know, 8 kilometres at just under 4%, but that's enough. So the teams will have to maybe use some more riders, some more firepower, which may kind of weaken them a little bit towards the final. But there's enough teams now starting to work on the front, and some of the kind of stronger riders, we've already mentioned Taco van der Hoorn, who's sitting in second place. Movistar now getting involved. A lot of teams. Initially we had Bahrain, Bora, AG2R, Intermarché and Astana. Ineos then came up, and now we're seeing Movistar. I'm still not going to say it's panic stations, but there needs to be a real concerted effort in this peloton to bring all these riders back. I still believe that some of these riders will be brought back, but I tell you what, they're still riding well together. You can just see we're starting to kind of rise up a little bit now. Riders are starting to feel the effect of this stage today. 200 kilometres. It's quite what? It's 17 degrees, not overly warm, but no place to hide for this breakaway. They have to stay together as long as possible, but the peloton have to really push in this climb if they want to bring these riders back.
We're just about to go through Villanueva de las Aguedas, which is another of these little mountain foothill or hill foothill foothill villages with beautiful white fronted buildings with blue shutters on them mostly. They're being given 4:48, as you can see there, and that is still a tasty lead. I wonder how this next how impactful this next climb will be. As you say, Brian, it's going to be a pivotal moment, particularly when they go over the top of it, to see what that gap is and whether this group is all still together as well, because there's got to be some very, very tired legs in here, bearing in mind this went clear after only about 15k and all the way up that first category climb of the Puerto del El Boyar, which was the first classified climb today. But this is a feature.
My calculations, the peloton have to bring back 4 minutes in the next 12 kilometres, because there's only so much you can bring back in a descent. And I think these riders, give them 30-40 seconds at the bottom of the climb at the end, they could possibly hold on. So that's what I think. 4 minutes they have to bring back before we get to the top of this long climb, which is at 12 kilometres to go. So a big ask from the peloton.
For those of you who've been on a break, welcome back to our coverage of the first of 5 stages of the Ruta del Sol, the Vuelta Andalucia, with myself, Jez Cox and Brian Smith. We're going to be talking you through the last 23 kilometres, and that peloton still chasing 8 riders who have only just under 5 minutes now. It's going to be very close to bring this one back in time, as Brian says, and notably a fairly long descent of around about 7-8 kilometres and then more to bring them all the way down to that final kicker over the bridge. In effect, it's something in the region of about 10k downhill, and we have 10k uphill, of course, to the top of that final classified climb. So a lot of descending. The time gap over the top for whatever remains of our breakaway, whether they're all together or not, will be absolutely critical, I guess, at that point. The most experienced rider in that breakaway by a long way is Alvaro Quadros, who we believe is leading in the King of the Mountains competition right now, going into this final climb, the rider for Caja Rural. He's 26 years of age, and he's actually ridden this race every year of his professional career as well. Most of the other riders in that breakaway have only ever ridden the race once, if they've ridden it at all. But he's done 5, so he's got good experience, and he will, of course, have experienced the very finish we're going to today, because it's a regular feature, and we'll see why. The shots across the reservoir and looking into Iznaja, particularly impressive as we look up to the rock fortress, which gives a hint to its Arab origin. The castle of Hisn Ashar sits on top of it as well, overlooking the lake. So we'll look forward to seeing shots of that. However, as Brian has hinted at, I think we might not be looking too closely, because it might be a bit crazy, that final run-in, and all sorts could be spilling into it. Will it be our breakaway, or will it be a leading group or peloton who've snaffled them up before they got to the bridge? Let's see. It's going to be an exciting finale, this one. And now the team in those new green, black and red colours of Bora Hansgrohe take over. Thinking perhaps about launching one of their fast climbers into that final rise. Matteo Fabro, perhaps the Italian. Either of their Italian riders would be ideal for a finale like that. I'm thinking of Giovanni Aliotti as well as a potential fast finisher uphill, technical uphill rise like that. I don't know if you noticed this, Brian, but I saw one of the Burgos BH riders rolling to the front and asking the motorbike to move away from the front end. Probably the motorbike we're actually seeing our shots from right now, but he rode right the way down the outside of this line and was ushering for the motorbike to move off, because it'd been giving a little bit too much, or he felt, presumably, it'd been giving a bit too much shelter to the front end, because, of course, he does have a teammate in the breakaway.
Yeah, a lot of teams, especially the riders that are and the teams that are in the breakaway, are believing now. I'm starting to believe that the winner is going to come from the breakaway. You can just see that Bora Hansgrohe and the Green have come up towards the front, but where are the other teams? We just saw a shot of the bar, Cameron Worth for Ineos, who had been riding, is down the back, so he's done his work. So who's going to come up? Movistar are there. I just think it's too much now. 4:48, 21 kilometres ago. I know we've got this long climb, but I don't believe they can bring everybody back. And also, to add to that, just a few moments ago, we saw a car, one of the team cars, passing the peloton. I think it was the Caja Rural car. And I think that's the kind of main car. Normally you send your, the second car up, and I think the Caja Rural car is going up, because I think they believe that the winner, and look at the wind, it's not as if it's kind of headwind, it's kind of helping these riders, and I think the Caja Rural car believes that Quadros could possibly be winning the stage and maybe taking the jersey, and that's why they've decided to come up and try and give them that information and help them and not allow them to kind of get too carried away. So if they stay together, the rides, they've got enough time, and I believe that the winner could be coming from this group in front here.
Rune Herregods there, going to the front with a decisive push as well, and that is telling. That is telling for Wojtek Repa. Here he is. He was looking like he was struggling at the back anyway. So at this stage, one man down, and down to 7 riders in the lead. That was under the, well, it was kind of an attack of Rune Herregods by the look of it, Brian, the Belgian rider. How much is that going to play into their hands now? The fact that we've got 2 teams in there. One team that has 2 riders, of course, Sportwander and Baloise. There's Herregods and De Wilde as well.
I think it's too early for any of this stuff, and I think the information is coming from the team car that's, look guys, looks like the winner is going to come from here. You've got 2 riders here. I think the more they stay together, get to the final climb. The final climb is hard enough. 1.3 kilometres at 7%, 9%. Doing this in my book, is not the right thing to do. Stop, start, and you're going to ship a lot of time. It's in all these riders' interests, because this is the first stage. Potentially, some of these riders could hold some time in the next few stages and go far. So they want to try and get to the finish with as much time as possible. The fact that Sport Vlaanderen are starting to attack this is possibly not, in my book, the best tactic, because they're starting to look at each other. Gaps are opening, and I'll say it again. Staying together is probably, the best thing that they could do, just helping each other, because it's going to come down to who's got the legs in the end to go up this kind of final climb.
Well, Rune Herregaards has gone again, and this has split the group at this stage as well. Xavier Isada is the Spaniard in the orange of Euskaltel Euskadi, who's trying to work his way across. Mark Christian also distance in the middle of that split there. But you're right though, Brian, very early stages in this climb as well to be looking to split things up. But I wonder if could there be some gentle, not so obvious sandbagging that's been going on there? They're looking to try and shake someone out, perhaps. Seems like, as you say, an odd tactic.
Yeah, with this far out, it is a little bit... not only is Herregaards, going on the attack, he's actually putting his teammate under pressure as well here. To have two riders over the top of this climb, it's in their best interest. They have got the numbers. They're the only team in this breakaway with two riders. So why attack if your teammate is feeling it a little bit? Go over the top and then try the kind of 1-2, because you don't have to be the best climber to win this stage today. If everybody comes onto this final climb, it will be the kind of best climber, the best rider with the power in the legs. But if there's two of you over the top, then even De Wilde here at the back, if he gets 30 seconds on the descent, then he could possibly hold on for the win.
So we're on the final classified climb of the day. We're on the lower slopes of the Alto de la Parrilla, the third category climb. Inside 20k to go now. They'll go over the top of that with 12k to go and start a long descent of around about 10.5k to take them to the bridge that goes across the reservoir in Isnacha, and then that final technical steep climb that ramps and steepens all the way up to the finish as well. Still over 4.5 minutes the gap, and interesting conversation going on at the front between Movistar and Bora Hansgrohe, perhaps about just how much work will be done here and how much needs to be done. Of course, if they went to the line with this kind of gap, Brian, this could even be a fascinating GC shaping day for the whole 5 days. I can't see it staying at that kind of gap, although it is at the moment, depending on where they are in the climb, I guess, of course, looking like it's actually going out a little bit more too.
Well, that will be the information. I'm just looking at, I'm getting another bit of information as we speak about the time gap of 4:41. The real gaps are wrong, the TV gaps. So I'm not too sure. We'll have to kind of wait and see. I might actually try and take one myself. But if this is right, 4:41, that does come into play. What you want is not this attacking. You have to think, the longer game, and I think that's the conversation at front of the peloton. It's damage limitation now. How much time are these guys going to get? I'm not saying that they're going to go all the way until Sunday, but like you say, if they gain a couple of minutes, some of these guys can kind of hang on. We've seen it happen in other races, but they have to stay together. They have to push hard over the top. But we'll get some more information on these time gaps, and I'll try and take one as we see something at the side of the road.
Well, Mark Christian's ridden his way back in there. I'm not sure it's so much that he was dropped, more that he was gapped effectively, and has sensibly taken his time to wind his way back across there. We have Xavier Isada of Spain alongside Rune Herregaards and Okamika of the Burgos BH team. Stephen Bassett, the American, for Human Powered Health in there as well, and just rejoining them, Mark Christian and Lindsay de Wilde.
Just getting information from the bike exchange car from Matt White, saying the last time gap they got was 3:45 into the team car. So Bike Exchange are deciding that they want to kind of pull this gap back, and Movistar really interested. Bora, some of the other teams that were riding earlier on today, Bahrain, AG2R, Intermarché, possibly maybe thinking of the stage at that time and not thinking of the overall, but it looks as if Bora, Movistar and Bike Exchange thinking more of the overall. We're trying to bring this gap back. So if it is 3:45, the last gap, I still think it's going to be enough. Unless these completely capitulate, I do really think this is going to be enough, and the winner is going to come from this breakaway. But you have to think the long game. You don't want to give these riders 2 and 3 minutes. You want to try and kind of bring the gap back, and it could be close in the end if these guys start to mess around. The only 2 riders missing now are Alvaro Quadros from Caja Rural, the rider that looks as if he could be the king of the mountains. It determines on that classification who gets the points at the top of this climb, and also the Cairn Repa, the Cairn farmer rider. But you can't start looking at each other now. Keep it rolling, but this gap not moving, 4:41. So I do believe it is still coming down, but I still believe there's enough of a time gap for these riders to 3:29 now. So it is coming down, maybe not fast enough, but it could be a lot closer than we initially thought. But the top of the climb comes in about 4.5 kilometres. With Bike Exchange now pushing hard, they could possibly bring back another couple of minutes. So this could be a lot closer than maybe we're anticipating with the gaps that we're seeing on our screens.
Well, I think as you've suggested, Brian, if it does come back, it's going to be very close. The tall figure of Ben Turner, if I'm not mistaken there, for Ineos Grenadiers, the youngster, stepping up and signing to the team over the winter. In fact, changing to racing for that team halfway through the cyclocross season as well, because he's a super talented cross rider, Ben Turner. And now one of the tallest figures, so easy to pick out on that team, the youngster. He's getting involved in the chase as well. Now we have Lindsay de Wilde going to the front with the number 161 on his back. That's how to tell the 2 Belgians apart, 161, 162. The rider on the back, Rune Herregods, has been going through incredibly hard. Every time he's got to the front, he's gone through probably harder than the others would want. And on the first occasion he did that, he actually shook out his own teammate in Lindsay de Wilde. But Wilde now is stuck. De Wilde is stuck on the front. He's flicked his elbow, and there's not much chance at the moment of... Mika coming through, but there he is. He's going to come through steadily and use a little bit of downhill to do his turn. And it is Ben Turner who's sitting in amongst our leading riders here as well. We haven't mentioned so far very much anyway, Brian, the UAE Team Emirates. They've not been that evident so far, but Matteo Trentin just going through our shot there. Someone who will be looking, I guess, to use this race for a little bit of pre-classics training, but an ideal week for him. Sort of rider, actually, as we look back, we're talking about the Eric Zabels of this world and the Oscar Frieras of this world. Oscar Freire very much in the shape of, or no, not quite the same Palmares, but similar to Matteo Trentin in the way he rides. There's a rider who could take the overall in a 5-day race like this. Do you think, or am I wrong? Feel free to disagree with me.
For Matteo Trentin,
yeah,
I think this is going to be too difficult with the climbs. I think he will even struggle on this climb towards the finish. But I'm just looking now that Bike Exchange are using their tactic now and rolling the dice. I think it's going to see other teams come up, because if the gap is not coming down, then they start looking around who's going to ride. We saw earlier on in the climb, Movistar were trying to chat to Bora, but a concerted effort here from Bike Exchange. The gap is coming down. It's 3 minutes now. There's 3 kilometres to the top of the climb. They could take another couple of minutes out. You can see some of the teams starting to move up. Bahrain victorious, AG2R who have kind of sat back. So the gap at 3:08. Coming down all the time. It's going to be a kind of nail-biting finish.
And they are looking around at each other a bit. There's a little bit of too much chess going on maybe in this front group now. We had a little pause there, didn't we, Brian, where they just sort of looking at each other. They were doubled up, 2 lines, riders taking a drink and watching each other. They can't afford to be doing that at this stage, can they?
it was that steep pitch that just kind of, burnt their legs a little bit, and they were just getting their breath back. But
that's no excuse. No, that's no excuse.
Big exchange. Bora there, Intermarché moving up a little bit. So if this gap continues to come down, then other teams will think, whoa, I thought we were out the game, now we're back in the game, and get back to the front and kind of help out the chase. But I still think it could be the breakaway. If they don't mess around, I still think they'll have enough time at the top of this climb, which comes in 2.3 kilometres time. Not enough time to bring back 3 minutes, but if they mess around in the run in, they can lose 30-40 seconds at least on that final 1.3 kilometres up to the finishing line. So it is because the time gaps are a bit more real now. 2:53, it's becoming a little bit more of a nail-biting finish, which is what we wanted to see. I think looking at the routes, the riders that are here, all we want to see is some really interesting stages, and I think we're going to have this. And the fact that this group is out there of 6 riders now, 2 have been dropped, Quadros and Repa. They have to stay together if they get a chance. But the other teams thinking there is an opportunity of a stage here. If they keep on riding at this rate, then they have got a chance in the peloton to bring them back. But at this moment, I think another couple of teams have to really commit themselves instead of just kind of sitting and letting Bike Exchange and Ineos and Bora do it at the front.
Well, we are going to be treated to 5 days or 4 days of very much this kind of racing. Some big climbs early on to split things up and cause breakaways, and then a big chase over the slightly easier second half of the stage. It's not until that final stage on Sunday into Chiclana de Segura where we have this long final climb. It's not crazy long, 7k, but it's got some steep sections in it, and certainly the race organisers believe that might be where the final general classification is decided. Right now, though, the stage victory is within the grasp of these riders. Should they decide, or should they be able to keep working together? Stephen Bassett, the American, for Human Powered Health. There's the top of that same rise where we saw them just easing back over the top of to regather themselves. Mark Christian, the British rider for Elo Cometa, and the Okamika of the Burgos BH team. Rune Herregods and Lindsay de Wilde, the 2 Belgians for Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise. And then Xavier Isada is the other Spaniard now. There's only 2 Spaniards in there now for Euskatel, I should say, the Basque team. Under 3 minutes now, if that time gap is accurate. It's looking much more like it is. And look at that long string now, the rat's tail on the back of our peloton. As we say, 141 riders started this morning. We already know we're down by at least 1 after an early crash. Two riders down, sorry, I should say. So 139 confirmed still in the race. Let's see how things fall at the end of what's turned out to be quite a tough opening stage. They're all tough. Let me remind viewers at home, there are no time gaps available out on the road all the way through these 5 days. It's very pure racing, this. For the second year in a row, no time trial, and there's no time gaps. Time gaps. Let me start again. Time bonuses. So no bonuses. Thank you, Brian. No time bonuses to be gained either out on the course or at the finishes. So it's very pure racing for these 5 days. Just loads of up and down and loads of jagged finishes as well to make things exciting. Oh, this will be a useful shot. So looking back for our 6 riders in the breakaway, we look back down that road through the olive groves here to see the front end of our peloton. There is the visual gap, the pointy end of that peloton pointing in their direction. Does that look like 2 minutes 40? Oh, I'll leave that.
Yeah,
one.
in a climb like this, it's very hard. I still think now, and I think the riders in the breakaway believe they can stay away. There's still a lot of kind of hard riding in the last 12 kilometres, but we're getting close now to the top of this climb, and I have to say, Bike Exchange have really kind of eaten into this gap. Until they came to the front, this gap was staying out there, and it was, a no-brainer that the breakaway were going to have their day. But, this is what we're saying before. This is a really concerted effort, not just riding tempo up here. They're riding hard. You can tell that, the nature of the front of the peloton, the shape of it, and these riders are starting to race against each other now, and it's going to come down to who's got anything left in their legs. Mark Christian here And also De Wilde for Sport Vlaanderen, really struggling as they're battling over the top for the King of the Mountains point. So 2:39, I think they've got the stage because it's downhill. We come into the final town, we've got that last 1.3 kilometres, so looking good for the breakaway. But who's it going to be? And from that helicopter shot, Quadros from Caja was just off the back of the team cars behind this front group.
This is the descent now, and effectively 11 kilometres of descending right the way down into the valley. You can see in front of you. At some point we'll start to see the shots of what is the biggest reservoir in Andalucia as well, the Isnaja reservoir that we're going to be crossing just before that final K. Look to me, looking up the road in that shot, we should have it confirmed for us shortly, that it was in fact Ander Okamica, the Spaniard for Burgos BH, taking those King of the Mountains points. He was third over the first category climb of the day, so that could see him pulling on that white jersey. There we see Simon Yates on the radio, so that's what all this work is about in the white and light blue colours of Team Bike Exchange Jayco, setting him up. I'd have thought this kind of final climb would be absolutely ideal for Simon Yates, Brian, wouldn't it? If he can get to the bottom of it in good position and having reeled in that breakaway. Just under 2.5 minutes for them now.
Yeah, we're just looking at if Okamica had taken those 3 points, it leaves both of them, Quadros on 12. With Quadros taking the higher category of climb today, so it looks as if Caja will have that jersey at the end of the day, but an equal points. But I think our concentration now is of the 6 riders in front. It did look as if Mark Christian and De Wilde at the back here were kind of tailed off a little bit over the top of the climb, but that means nothing. And they're running towards the final. Everybody knows that possibly the Burgos BH rider Okamica is probably one of the kind of stronger climbers now. She don't want to come to this final climb with them, so we're going to see some attacking from the group of 6 as they try to win the stage. And this gap, while they're attacking and stop-start, thinking about how they can win this stage, this gap is going to come down. Ineos have come to the front, which is kind of no real surprise. Everybody knows at this stage of the stage that when we get onto a descent, there's always these dangers. So you want to be near the front. We already saw Bike Exchange with Simon Yates towards the front. So it's important to keep switched on even in these races, staying in the front, staying out of trouble, because we always see things happen. Slide outs, all these sort of thing in a descent like this. I hope it doesn't happen. But it's you have to be safe. So hopefully everybody will get down this and we start to ride in towards the town of the final climb, and we see a battle for the stage.
We're just about to get into a section of this final descent where it gets a little bit more testing and technical. We've got some snaking roads starting. They're already twisting and turning, but much more so as they go down to a dead turn before heading their way back northwards again, descending off the back of the Alto de Paria and making their way all the way down to the Rio Genil, which is the river-like section that flows out the bottom end of the Isnaja reservoir. Mark Christian has wound his way back on, so we still have 6 riders in the lead: an American, a British rider, 2 Spaniards and 2 Belgians. Notably, those 2 Belgians still on the same team there. And Rune Herregaard's looking round, a slap on his back from Lindsay de Wilde. Pressure on that team, Brian, regardless of how those riders are feeling. When you've got 2 in there from the same team, you'd have thought they've got to make the numbers count.
Yeah, a little bit of pressure. De Wilde, I think, for me, has to be the man that picks his moments. Maybe when we come off this descent, De Wilde would be the rider that I would say, look, you're not as strong as maybe some of the other riders, that you have to go on the attack and maybe kind of help Herregaard's, because even Herregaard's up against the likes of Okamica and possibly Isasa from Euskaltel. They're looking strong, so certainly when it gets to the climb. So if De Wilde can go on the attack and gain 20-30 seconds, it gives Herregaard's a freer ride at the back. You have to kind of use these numbers, so just watch out for De Wilde 161. He's been at the back of the peloton. Now we're off this climb. This is his opportunity. Just lay off a little bit and try and go on the attack. And just as I say that, it's his opposite rider that does it. It's Herigos that does that. And I think that the weaker man has to do this rather than a stronger rider. And possibly we'll see another 1-2. So as Herigos is brought back, this is a big opportunity. 1-6-1. As he swings over, now it's your chance to go. And they have to play their numbers game.
These 6 riders have got that yellow leaders jersey in their grasp. If they just don't mess around too much, they're making it really exciting for us, but they still have 2 minutes, or just under 2 minutes now. And it's downhill, although it doesn't look quite like it now. There's a little bit of false flat in the middle, but with net downhill all the way down to the reservoir. So around that turn, you can just see in front of you there, it kicks down again. And you can see from the speed, we are still travelling fast, net downhill. They have it within their grasp as long as there is not too much cat and mouse. We might get another little visual shot as we look back across the olive groves and across that S-bend. There they are. And in a way, the terrain as well as the descent making them string fully out as the pressure is on. And it's the British team of Ineos Grenadiers who are driving hard. Who do you think that... I mean, is this about Brian keeping their riders up and out of trouble on this technical descent, or have they got one particular rider, do you think, in mind to launch to over the bridge and up to the finish in Isnacha?
I think first and foremost on a descent like this, it's safer to ride near the front. We see it in other stage races, and you should be doing it here as well. And you saw Bike Exchange right on the climb, and also moving up, you saw Simon Yates, right near the front. You cannot take relax for a moment in any race. But I think this gap, I'm not too sure if it's even 1 minute and 52 seconds now. So it is coming down the whole time. You can see that Sport Vlaanderen in their kind of white helmets started to do the 1-2. I think they have to keep on trying this. I think for me, they need De Wilde to go. He's the weakest of the riders and save Herigos, because Herigos was a rider that was looking strong enough. When you're the weaker rider, you have to make the effort, and you have to play your options. But at the same time, this gap is coming down the whole time. 6 kilometres to go, 1 minute and 50. If it is that, then it's going to be a real interesting finish. But also just talking about who's going to win the stage. As we see, this front group starting to split up now, does look as if they're going to be battling against each other for the stage. But we're also going to see some action in the peloton behind, because as you say, there's no bonus seconds, there's no nothing, but there will be time gaps in this finish.
Yes, absolutely. And it's once again Rune Herregaard's the rider with the black socks. That's the way to tell them apart between the two Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise Belgians. There he is with the black socks on the front. He goes through again. He's obviously got good form and feeling good today. It's not just team orders, I would suggest. He looks sparky and on it. And now we get a good close look up of the Ineos Grenadiers. And you can just see in there Jonathan Navarez right in the middle of that group, alongside Eddie Dunbar, Salvatore Puccio as well at the front there, adding their might to that pace setting on the front of our peloton. So there is still a gap there. Xavier Isada, the Spaniard, is on the back of them. The wind has been constantly blowing from the left-hand side of these riders all the way, because it's a fairly straight line, actually, heading north-eastward from the Sierra de Grazellama, where we headed off to, right the way up to where we're finishing today. As I say, the rider's going to be taking exactly the same road and same finish tomorrow, about halfway through tomorrow's stage, so they will know this well by that point. Once again, these two riders getting back on. I'm not sure whether it's Mark Christian that keeps getting distance or whether it's Lindsay de Wilde, but it's the two of them. How many times have we seen this, Brian? Again, Mark Christian winds his way back on. They're either saving something or they're swinging. It's one of those two.
No, I think they're swinging. I think the both of them are the same. But it's every time that it goes uphill, the two of them get dropped. And I think really they have to take their opportunity. I know it's very difficult when you get back on, but use the kind of downhill to try and kind of gain advantage. We know when we come to the final climb that you won't have the legs. I was just looking at my clock rolling on the 5 kilometres to go. Hopefully the breakaway are through there. a minute and a half ago, and I think the peloton are just about to reach that moment, and they are now. So the gap for me is at 1:42.
Well, those of you just tuning in towards the end of the race, my name is Jez Cox. I've got Brian Smith with me on the mic as well, and we are looking at an exciting finale here where I think we are going to see our first breakaway of the first stage of this year's Ruta del Sol survive. If they don't mess around too much, this is going to be a brilliant finale. And as Brian says, of course, we're going to have two races going on here as well, because there are time gaps all the way down through these groups, and this final climb is hard enough and steep enough to crack some open, even in amongst our main peloton, where perhaps we might suggest would be where the general classification riders for the whole week for these 5 days might still be sitting. But then the question remains, how much will this breakaway shape the top end of that general classification by the time of that final 7k climb on Sunday that brings the whole 5 days to a close? Going into the shadows now, a very late afternoon in southern Spain. This is the warmest part of Europe, and you can see what it's done to the landscape here already, dusty and dry. Perfect racing conditions in these long shadows now in late afternoon this Wednesday. I hope you're enjoying the racing. We're going to have 5 whole days of exactly this week. They're going to do it, Brian, aren't they, by the looks of it?
Yeah, they're going to do it, but who's it going to be? The 6 riders, but 4 of them look stronger than the other 2 that keep on getting distance. And if you don't have the legs and uphill, then why not make an opportunist move and try and kind of steal those seconds? But as we see, the kilometres are moving down quickly now. No opportunities here. You're not going to get much of a gap. I think on the flat piece before we got here was the opportunity, or possibly over this bridge. But once we go over this bridge, we turn sharp right and we're straight up this final climb. So I think it's very important, not just for these riders to look at the stage win, but if you've got an eye on the overall prize come Sunday, then you have to make the effort, get to the front, and really challenge everybody. Because as you say, no time bonus, nothing. You can make up some time on some of your competitors, your rivals, on this type of finish.
Yeah, most of the riders now down on their drops, knowing they're about to go into a really testing finale. That's the bridge taken in. This is the turn for the sweeping switchbacks. We've got 2 switchbacks. The first of them is right in front of them now, which take the riders up these final 1,400 metres. A little look over the shoulders there from Lindsay de Wilde. Doesn't need to, because the peloton are far enough off, but they cannot afford to mess around too much. It's the same 2 riders at the back, Mark Christian and Lindsay de Wilde. And stuck on the front right now, a combination of his teammate, Rune Herregods, and the American rider, Stephen Bassett of Human Powered Health. Tactical testing now at this stage, and a little wind on the pedals of Lindsay de Wilde, number 161 there, one of the 2 Belgians in this breakaway. Who's looking good, Brian, to you right now, looking at their body?
I think Herregods looks good, but so does Okamika for Burgos. And I tell you what, there's a huge opportunity here. 1 kilometre to go for these riders to win the stage, take the lead in this race. Just remind everybody that this is an average of 7%, but it does go up to just over 9% the closer we get to the finish. So the last 500 metres of this climb to the finish are the hardest.
I think for all the riders in this breakaway, this would be the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest win of their career. And it's an attack from the peloton, as well as an attack from our breakaway as well. And this is one of the Quick Step Alpha Vinyl riders going, but at the front end now, it's Okamika, Ander Okamika, the Spaniard, who's going hard at the front end. And again, it smashes apart our peloton exactly the same way it's done so far. The same 2 riders off the back. That attack neutralised in this instance by Rune Herregods, who switches off again. And the American Stephen Bassett now is the rider on the front. And they are onto the lower slopes.
This is Esteban now, but look at AG2R just behind. They've got De Wolf there, Greg Van Avermaet, Cosnefroid. So, but just look, Mark Christian and De Wilde have made it back. They can look down to the left-hand side. Can we see them? There's still enough of a gap. We're just seeing them now in kind of the left-hand side, down by the trees there. But yeah, this is going to be a really exciting finish, as we had predicted.
And Okamika, the last of those to attack, and the attack's coming thick and fast from the peloton now as well. And are we going to see riders who are capable of jumping across to our breakaway? I don't think so at this stage, because they're well into the final K. We'll try and mop up both races as we get closer to the line. We're going to focus on the front end now. Once again, Stephen Bassett kind of caught on the front, the American for Human Powered Health, in the orange and purple.
Oh, panic behind.
Here we go. Yeah, the sprint is going to have to start early by the looks of it. It's Stephen Bassett who's opened up. The tall figure of the American rider going hard. He's got Rune Herregaards on his wheel. And coming over the top of them is Xavier Asada. Xavier Asada opening up, but he's just been caught as well. And it is Stephen Bassett heading to the line alongside Rune Herregaards. These two are getting ever closer to the steepest part, and they've actually touched at that point too. Rune Herregaards, the Belgian, he's looked the strongest all the way through in the black socks. He's going to go to the line. He's going to be our winner. The Belgian, Rune Herregaards of Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise, takes a massive win, and he will take that yellow leaders jersey too on stage 1 of the Ruta del Sol. Let's look at what's going on behind from our peloton though as well, because they're going to be closing up so fast on the back as well. Now this looks like it might be Alessandro Covi. I will do my best to pick out exactly who it is. But he has jumped clear of a chasing peloton that was being led by Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl into the bottom stages. ZNX Stibar had attacked them. That looks like Matteo Trentin making his way up to the line. Trentin just getting that one, I think, by the looks of it. And that was close come the finish, Brian. How close was that? Great win. A great win for Rune Herregaards, who hadn't held back at all, had he? He really was the strongest rider in there come the finish as well. Big win for the Belgian rider from the Belgian team. And that was a very exciting, if slightly messy finale. So we will do our best to collate the final result and talk you through it as we get another little look at this. Here we go, Brian.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate. I think Stephen Bassett just went a little bit too early. You know, they kind of bumped shoulders a little bit, and I think it put Stephen off. But I think you see him crossing the line here, holding on the barriers. He had nothing left to Herregaards, and you know, we did say that he looked, one of the strongest. So does the Burgers rider just behind there of Okamika. But an interesting final. I think the strongest man from the breakaway won, and Belgium have their day. Sport Vlaanderen will lead this race, but the time gap came right down towards the end. There's a large peloton just behind, but a well-deserved win there. And you have to get in the breakaway in the first place, and I don't think for any of these riders that got themselves in the breakaway that they would be thinking of victory. You have to believe it, of course, when you get in that breakaway, but of course when it went up to 15 minutes and then they had over 4 minutes, 5 minutes coming and running, and there's still a lot of work to be done, but you can see a large peloton just behind. I think you're right, Covey maybe had got some seconds. Trentin just kind of nipped in front of looked like Serrano. So an interesting finish, and it's not the only interesting finish we've got over the next few days.
My goodness, no. We are coming back through Isnaha, where these shots are live right now, tomorrow, don't forget. But pretty much every day is like this. Front-ended with big climbs, favouring the breakaway, you'd suspect. Glorious sunshine set for the whole week as well, just like we've had here today. And fascinatingly, in a way, Brian, the finish result has mirrored pretty much every time we've had a tough moment or a big dig or going through a mountains point. It's been generally those three riders who've looked the strongest throughout. Stephen Bassett, the Americans, had a great ride there in second, opening up a little bit too soon before the top. Let's have a look at that final kilometre again once more. There were still 6 together at that stage.
I think at this moment you can see that there was clear fatigue, from everybody. There were a couple of attacks, but riders kept on getting back on. Mark Christian here, I think it was just a little bit too much for him. Once you see Omika start to go, it was all over for a couple of riders, and this was Stibar going. AJ to stand the wheel, tried to hold the wheel, but it was all over for De Wilder and Mark Christian at this moment in time. Asasa from Euskaltel was just distance a little bit as well, but just round this corner and all came back together again.
Yeah, it was just a little bit of easing in the middle of that final climb, wasn't there? A little bit of false flat, just enough. Good attack by Stibar, and he had enough there as well to then go again a second time and really drill it hard. That is classics prep in full effect right there, isn't it? Looking in good form.
Explosive, really explosive. So it just did come back together, and they just kind of gathered themselves a little bit. I think they were all waiting. I think they all knew that it got steeper towards the final, and they were just waiting for that kind of final effort. And Herrigods and Bassett were just kind of propped in the front as we look further behind, as we see Covey go. And I think that Seneschal, this time, it tried to go with them, and unfortunately didn't have the legs to do it.
Well, Alessandro Covi, one of those fast finishers in that UAE Team Emirates team, alongside Matteo Trentin, who we saw come good at the finish as well at the top. And we know he can climb as well as bunch sprint with good effect. Let's have a look back. This was the start of the final phase of that sprint. Now they knew they were into the steepest section. Stephen Bassett did open up very early at that stage. Nothing left for Mark Christian at the back. And Bassett, not the most aerodynamic of sprinters, you have to say, Brian, but effective all the same, come that finish. And that was that balking between the two of them. And in a way, it was just enough to finish Stephen Bassett off. I don't think there'll be any afters after that, because it was a bit of left and right at the same time, or would there?
No, I think it was, they just coming together there. I think Bassett just gave absolutely everything. Just watch him after the line. He is absolutely spent. He stops against the barriers there, but... an exciting start to the Ruta del Sol. Looking forward to the next few days, and there's a few riders there noticeably, looking at the classics, their preparation. But sometimes you like it when the breakaway comes to the finish, and they battle it out.
How has it been escaped?
It was a difficult day to go away because it was 200 kilometers. That was quite a long stage. But when we went away with 8 guys, I know, okay, it's a large group, so that's ideal. We didn't went too hard in the start. The pelotons gave us a good margin, and I told the guys, okay, easy, and 100 Ks to go, we go all out, because we were with 8 guys, so if you want to chase us down, they have to put a lot of riders on the front of the peloton. And the cooperation was great. Everybody did this job. Nobody skipped turns. And that way you can come far. On the last climb, everybody tried to go alone, but we were 3-4 guys who were quite equal, so we couldn't distance each other. And when I felt it wasn't possible, I just counted up on my sprint, because I know after a hard day, I can arrive quite well. And my teammate, Lindsay de Velde, he did a fantastic job. He kept everything together on the flat parts. Here he let me in. So it was great to have to be with 2 teammates in the break. We also tried to keep the pace high when it sometimes went a bit down. So it was really a team effort.